Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. As you are all aware, we continue to see an increase in COVID-19 cases. So today, I want to start with a quick update on where we are in Missouri. 60% of these new cases are still in three main regions: St. Louis area, Kansas City area, and Southwest Missouri. We've also seen many more young people test positive for COVID-19 in the state. The average diagnosed patients is continuing to drop. Young, healthy people are more likely to have milder symptoms and quick recoveries. But what is concerning about this is that they may unknowingly carry the virus to someone older or with underlying conditions. We need young people to take this virus seriously and understand the responsibility they have in the health of their families and communities. Statewide hospitals are most recently reporting 932 hospitalized patients. Although COVID-19 hospitalizations have been increasing lately, our statewide ICU resources remain below capacity. There is a variation throughout the state depending on whether the region is an existing hotspot, but overall, we are in a good place. I want to remind Missourians that it is important to get the care you need and know that hospitals are safe and stand ready to serve. Do not delay your health care during this crisis. We also continue to test across the state to identify and isolate positive cases as quickly as possible. The state has now held community testing events in 50 Missouri counties. Yesterday, we began community testing in Jackson County, and a second round of community testing will take place in Southwest Missouri beginning July the 18th. As I have said many times, this virus is still here, and it's not going to just disappear. Yes, we are going to see more positive cases. We know this, but we are in a much different place than we were 4 months ago. We are much better prepared now to deal with the virus than we were in March. We know more about the virus and what preventive measures need to be taken. We know how to box in outbreaks. We know we can put up a hospital in less than 2 weeks. We have accelerated testing, and our healthcare system is stable, and our 4 pillars are still in check. With that said, if we want to keep Missouri moving forward, we must continue taking steps to slow the spread. We are not defenseless against COVID-19. I have said this almost every day since March, and I will continue to say it again. Social distancing is still the most important thing we can do. And if you can't social distance, wear a mask. Wash your hands and practice good hygiene. We all know how to do these things now, and it is up to us to continue making smart, safe, and responsible decisions, not just for our sake, but for the sake of everyone around us. The health and safety of Missourians will always be our number one priority. But as I have also said many times, we still have to be able to move forward and repair our economy. It is a balancing act between public health and economic recovery. You cannot have one without the other, and we will continue to do everything we can to keep Missourians safe and healthy while still getting our economy back on track. Along the lines of economic recovery, I want to remind everyone that federal funding has been made available to local governments through the CARES Act. Last week, the state released a toolkit to assist local government and provide recommendations on appropriate uses of the funding specifically for testing and contact tracings. These funds were released to local governments back in early May. It is important to utilize this funding to continue our COVID-19 response efforts and keep our communities headed into a safe and healthy direction. So let me say this. This money was got as soon as we could get it to the local levels. We wanted the local levels to get it in their hands to utilize it, to put it to work. The counties that haven't utilized that money yet, I am strongly urging them to use that money. One for testing, one for contact tracing, some of the basic things that have to be done. School's getting ready to start, and your communities need it right now. So we need to start investing in those two things, in particular on the local levels, that we know are a priority. As we move forward with recovery, the Missouri Department of Economic Development continues to play a major role. Director Dixon and his team have worked hard to develop a plan that drives recovery across Missouri businesses, community, citizens, and infrastructure. Today, we're excited to announce $50 million in new grant programs for Missouri businesses with the recovery process. And we're happy to have Director Dixon here to talk more about these programs. Director?
Thank you, Governor. Thanks to the Governor's leadership, we are proud to announce two new important resources for Missouri businesses, one focused on PPE production and another that is designed to help small businesses across our state. Now, while our economy is showing signs of recovery, we certainly have a long road ahead. But as we've said before, and as you just heard from the Governor, our public health care response and our economic recovery are two sides of the same coin. When the Governor first outlined the Show Me Strong recovery plan, the state of our public health care system and the availability of PPE were noted as critical components to our economic recovery and to the overall safety of our citizens. The announcement of these two new programs today is a perfect example of that overlap. Between these two programs, as you just heard, up to $50 million in CARES Act funding is being made available to assist businesses across Missouri. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, but they have been struggling since the onset of COVID-19. Many businesses have had to rethink their operations model to work safely. For example, with restaurants shifting to curbside pickup or small retailers shifting to e-commerce, for example. That's hard for any business to make that transition, but it's even harder for some of our smallest businesses. So of that $50 million, $30 million of today's announcement is a small business grant program to help ensure that Missouri's small businesses can seek relief. Funds from these programs can be used for covering salaries of workers during closed or reduced hours, website designed to facilitate e-commerce, leasing additional space to accommodate social distancing, and many more efforts to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. Also, as part of the program, $7.5 million will be directed specifically to family-owned farms and family farm corporations. Of course, as you know, agriculture is a major part of our state's economy that has faced its own set of unique challenges as a result of COVID-19. Missouri's businesses need to be set up for success in the wake of this virus, and they need to be prepared to help withstand other disasters in the future. So on the topic of PPE, we know how difficult it was when first demand skyrocketed earlier this spring as supply chains around the world were disrupted by the impacts of those viruses in foreign countries where most of that PPE was manufactured. And certainly now, in some cases, it still remains a challenge given the high demand as businesses in our public health care system begin to resume full operations. That's why we're allocating $20 million of the CARES Act funding to create a PPE retooling grant program. PPE supply is critical to our healthcare response and to the reopening of our economy. Now, the Governor has talked about this many times. We need to bring PPE manufacturing closer to home to make sure that we're not dependent on any other country for these vital products. So to those Missouri companies who've already begun making PPE, we thank you sincerely. Back in March, they responded to the call for PPE production to protect our healthcare workers at the height of the pandemic, and their fast action to retool has been invaluable and has saved lives. Whether they were large manufacturers or small family-owned farms or family-owned businesses, they made a difference. These companies rose to the challenge, making investments in their company and in their business to continue to produce, and our state will continue to have need for their services. That's why we're using a tiered and targeted approach that anticipates both future need for high demand and prioritizes those manufacturers who have already pivoted to produce PPE. The retooling grant program will reimburse costs associated with purchasing equipment, upgrading or expanding facilities, lab equipment, and others up to $500,000. As the governor just said, the virus is here and is not going away for the time being, and we have to protect both the lives and the livelihoods of Missouri workers, families, and our children. Now, Missouri has an opportunity to both expand our economy through the production of PPE while also providing for the safety of our citizens. Over the next week, of course, we'll be addressing additional issues related to our economic recovery. I know there will be plenty of questions and folks interested in the programs that we've announced today, and you can certainly find more guidelines and information about how to apply and how to access these resources online at showmestrong.mo.gov/business. Finally, thank you, Governor, for your leadership on these important issues. We certainly appreciate the focus both on the public health recovery as well, or public health response, as well as the economic recovery. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for all you're doing and the work you're doing for the state, leading us back as we recover from this virus. Director Dixon will be back on Thursday to talk about COVID-19 recovery programs and opportunities. Tomorrow, we will be holding a separate press conference here in the Capitol on violent crime. As always, please continue to be aware of COVID-19. The virus is still there, but again, we are not defenseless. We can protect ourselves by social distancing, wearing a mask, and washing our hands. And we must continue to do this even as we move forward with the recovery. I want to thank everyone, and God bless. The other thing before we get into questions today, I want to address the McCloskey situation in St. Louis. First of all, as governor of this state, I have always, and never waived on the Second Amendment. I have a lengthy history of that, where I've never waived from the Second Amendment. When the Castle Doctrine was introduced in the state of Missouri, myself and Representative Jones, Kenny Jones, two former sheriffs, were the ones that developed the Castle Doctrine here in Missouri that actually went to be the national model, which is the exact one the McCloskeys were defending their property with in St. Louis, which they had every right to do under the Castle Doctrine. Law enforcement on that night was available. We weren't notified through the governor's office, through the Highway Patrol was not notified of that situation. However, that being said, that couple had every right to protect their property. They have the ability to do that as private citizens like everyone else. But what they should not go through is a prosecutor attempting to take their constitutional rights away by filing charges against them for protecting their property. In Missouri, it is very difficult to do anything to someone that is elected official on removing them from office. It's very difficult. One of the things that we need to address in future sessions. I just got off the phone with the President of the United States before I walked out here today. He understands the situation in Missouri. He understands the situation in St. Louis and how out of control it is for a prosecutor to let violent criminals off and not do their job and try to attack law-abiding citizens. The conversation I had with the President said that he would do everything he could within his powers to help with this situation, and that he would be taking action to do that. I'm thankful that he's getting involved in this situation. I'm thankful that he's going to stand up for people on their legal rights, and we're going to move forward in this state. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about special session. We're going to be talking about violent crime, and we're going to be about time changes need to be made. But things have to change in this state. And if people are going to take an oath, just like I did when I was a sheriff, to do your job, you need to do a job. You need to serve justice equally for all, and you need to abide by the laws and the Constitution. So with that, Kelly, we'll take questions.
All right, thank you, Governor. Director Dixon. Brian?
Yes, Director Dixon, thank you for your time.
Brian.
Good to see you. Two quick questions. Do you have any more information about the COVID apparent outbreak at the Wentzville GM plant? So that's my first question. And two, any idea on how many companies in the state of Missouri are producing PPE? Thanks.
Thanks. On the second part of it, we've known that over 200 Missouri companies have retooled to produce PPE. It continues to change every single day. We've also put out resources earlier in the pandemic related to the PPE marketplace to help connect buyers and sellers, to help those institutions and organizations across the state that need access to that. We've talked about that with the help of Google early on in the pandemic. As it relates to General Motors, Brian, I don't think that's exactly the situation on the ground there. There was not an outbreak in the facility or anything like that. But obviously, General Motors did announce a layoff earlier this week. And as we've talked, as I just talked just a couple of moments ago, the public health situation, the economic situation are inextricably linked, and this is exactly what we're talking about. Those folks that were laid off from that shift, they eliminated a third shift temporarily, is not because of a market condition, but it's because of disruptions in their workforce due to COVID-19. And it's happening all around the world, it's happening all around the country, and obviously it's happening in our state as well. Now General Motors is one of the companies that have put in place stringent protections and protocols in place for their own workers, but obviously that's why the items that we were just talking about, you just heard from the governor related to social distancing, basic hygiene, following the advice of public health officials is so critically important, because we are literally all in this together. I can also share we have been in conversations with the company earlier this week. They do not see any connection to this as it relates to the large investment, the nearly $1 billion historic investment that they started, and that obviously the governor, the entire team worked with them on last year. We believe that is going to proceed. This is not connected to that, as I mentioned in particular. And we'll continue to work with the company and with all employers across the state as we as a state, as individual communities, are dealing with the effects of this. Certainly, our heart goes out to those folks who are affected. There are teams that are available to provide assistance to them, and folks are responding as we speak. And so we're happy to work with them, and we do think, again, that this is a temporary situation. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dixon. Dr. Williams?
Thank you, Kelly. I just want to expound on the governor's statement, which I greatly appreciate. As you saw the numbers today, would just remind you that over about the past 4 or 5 days, we've averaged about 500 cases. And remember, when you see a number like that, that's due to the fact that we now have 26 labs reporting at various times. So those 900 cases could have all been from 7 to 10 days before. But again, we follow the trend, and the trend is about 500 cases a day, which is an uptick from what we've seen previously. But as the governor said, we know so much more about the virus and its environment today than we did on March 7th when we had our first case. And we get up every day because we believe that knowledge, which is what science is all about, gives us power. And that power, the more we know about the virus, the more we know about the environment it thrives in, the more we're able to contain it. Let me give you some examples. What we've learned about this virus. I looked at it this afternoon. Half of our counties have had less than 30 cases. We have counties, Holt, Hickory come to mind, that have had 1 case. We have a county that's had almost 8,000 cases, St. Louis County. So we've learned about this virus that it's not a one-size-fit-all type of thing. That, as the governor said, when you look at Kansas City, when you look at the St. Louis area, now when you look at an outbreak in southwest Missouri, that's a very different experience than other parts of the state have experienced. And we've learned that, and we use that to help control it. So we track this very carefully. We watch our hospitalizations. I keep up very closely with remdesivir. Every time a hospital needs remdesivir in Missouri, they call me for our emergency response center. So over the weekend, I shipped out a fair amount of remdesivir. So along with those numbers, I know people are getting sick because we had to send it out emergently over the weekend and talked with clinicians about that. Now, again, what we've learned is if you use remdesivir, if you've used antibodies, and if you treat early as opposed to late before people get on ventilators, they do better. So we've learned that. So we believe fervently we can do 2 things at once because we think they're both important to health. We believe we can open up the economy and we can also mitigate whether it be an outbreak or this community transmission. But at the same time, one thing we've learned about this virus is is that in the middle of the summer, on 100-degree days, it's still spreading community transmission among young people. We've learned that, okay? We see that. So I just want to reiterate again, my mother, who watches these faithfully, she's 91, will be proud of me that I'm color coordinated today, that I have the right mask with the right tie. But for young people or anybody in Missouri, recognizing that whether you've had one case or whether you've had 8,000 cases, if you can't social distance, you need to wear a mask and you need to use hand sanitizer. You just need to do that because that's what we've learned about the virus as we go forward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Dr. Williams.
Hey, Philip.
So cases, 60% are still in 3 areas.
Yes.
Are hospitalizations matching that, or 60% in those same 3 areas?
What we're really seeing, Philip, is down in Southwest Missouri, just because they have less hospitals down in Freeman and Joplin and Springfield. Certainly in Joplin, we're seeing uptick there. Kansas City, you're seeing more. St. Louis, interestingly, with an R0 right around 1, is holding its own at the time. But I know Mayor Cruson and Sam are concerned that as those cases go up, St. Louis again in the latest tranche of data led the number of cases. I think it was like 40%. So we share their concern. As I've said before, as that denominator goes up, we have to worry about the numerator. But we're not seeing that yet. But we also know it's a lagging indicator. So we take it very seriously and we watch it very seriously.
And what's the usual trigger for hospitalization? Is it some difficulty breathing or is it more severe?
It really is. 80% of people, as we've said, will just have, mild illness, but about 20% will have this progressive, they just can't breathe. It'll hurt, first of all, when they can't breathe, and then they'll feel short of breath, and then they'll finally just say, I've got to get to the hospital. So it's usually that difficulty breathing. It's not fever or headache. It's really the difficulty breathing that prompts them.
Thank you.
Hey,
Hi,
Connor.
Dr. Williams. Kind of going off of hospitalizations, we've been seeing them kind of go up as the cases are going up. And we're kind of approaching the peak that we saw in May, I believe,
Right.
early May. Is that concerning, or when will that number be concerning for?
Yeah. Connor, it's a great question because one thing, we were on a conference call this weekend with all the ID doctors, like we always do, the governor and I do. And one thing you're seeing is that there's been this backlog of cases, not COVID-19 cases, but people who didn't have surgery in March and April and May. So one thing we're watching very carefully is as you look at hospital capacity and you look at ventilators, they will tell you that these are cases that don't have anything to do with COVID. It's just people who had surgery and had a complication or whatever, they were sick and they had to go into the ICU. So to your point, not only do we have to focus on what you would call COVID-19 cases, but as we've opened up the state, we also have to pay close attention just to overall capacity, just the normal operating thing. So I hope I'm answering your question, is that we take a holistic approach. And so if you said, well, Randall, when our hospitalizations for COVID reach this, will you do that? And I'd say, Connor, we have to look at the big picture, because at the end of the day, what we're most interested in is beds and ICUs and ventilators. And so far, we're good.
So right now you would say we're at a good point, but is there a point that it would be like concern, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at a stable point now. And so what I tell you is we're stable. We're holding our own right now. But we always watch those new cases because lagging indicators would be, if those aren't all young people, then 2 to 3 weeks from now you'd see the hospitalizations. And we're also looking at what's going on with other uses of ICUs and ventilators. In other words, have we had an uptick in elective surgery that got postponed, but now we've caught up, there's not a backlog, so we'll move into August and not have that additional strain on the system.
Are we seeing that uptick in like elective surgeries
Yes.
and stuff like that?
Yes, we are. When we talk to the doctors, they very much say that that's a phenomenon that they're witnessing. That it's, I guess they would say it's a good problem to have, in that people have quit postponing surgery. But anytime you do surgery, I did it for 30 years, there's always a chance if somebody's got comorbidities, they're going to end up in an ICU that we really weren't running into in March or April when we weren't doing elective surgeries.
All right, thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thanks, Kelly.
Governor Parson? Brian?
Yes, Governor, good afternoon. State Senator Brian Williams of University City has written a letter to you and calling for basically you to call a special session about the issue of some policing issues. Have you received that letter, and is there any plan to call a special session for that?
My staff I don't know whether my staff has or not. I haven't personally seen it yet. We've been talking about a special session ever since session was over, what they had. The one thing that we are going to be talking about, if a special session, will probably deal with violent crime. The one thing I do want to emphasize to the media and to the legislature, there's a lot of things that will be discussed this year through different ways, through different mechanisms, through the legislative branch. It's going to take some time, whether that's policy changes, whether that's the police post commission going out, receiving information, trying to figure out where we're going to move forward. That will be a lengthy process, and that will be done in a legislative session. My biggest concern right now for the state of Missouri is violent crime, homicides. 3- and 4-year-old kids getting shot and killed, shot in their homes, 2 people losing their lives last night, and just continuing on. We have to give the law enforcement officers the tools they need to fight violent crime. And right now, more important than anything, we got to stand up for these law enforcement officers that are dealing with violent crime. I said this earlier this week when I went to Kansas City and I talked to some of the Kansas City officers. Look, these guys are maxed out. They've been in the streets now for over a month with protests, with other activities that are normally not duty, taken away from the street crimes that are happening out there in these violent crime situations. We got to fight violent crime, and I'm going to ask the legislators to come back in. The sooner the better that we're going to do that. We'll talk more about that tomorrow.
So one of the ways you can commit unlawful use of a weapon in Missouri is to exhibit in the presence of one or more persons any weapon readily capable of lethal use in an angry or threatening manner. How does that not apply to the McCloskeys?
Because it's under the Castle Doctrine. It's on their property. They have every right to protect their property.
Okay, so do you have any proof that they were on their property? Because I don't.
I don't. I mean, I'm not the prosecutor in this case. I'm not the lawyers in this case. I don't. All I know is what I've heard on that. I think it's why it's concerning when it's quite evident. I mean, from what I've seen, they're standing on their property. I don't think there's any question about that when you're standing on your front porch. So I don't know where all this other crimes. Again, I don't know all the details of it. I know this, that the prosecutor up there went after them, what I believe, for doing their legal rights of the Castle Doctrine.
Why are you so sure? Why are you so sure?
So I think the President and the Attorney General of the United States are going to take a look at it.
Well, why are you so sure if you don't know all the details?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Governor. As cases continue to rise and we keep pressing social distancing and masks, we saw some photos at the steak fry over the weekend, I believe it was.
Right.
And you weren't wearing a mask or social distancing. At what point does that get called upon?
Yeah, I think I was social distancing. I think everywhere I go, I try to keep in mind the social distancing part of it. I try to do that everywhere I go. Am I going to be perfect about it? No. People are going to come up to you from this position from time to time, want to talk to you, want to shake your hands or anything like that. I think the things I always try to do is make sure I maintain that social distance as much as I can. I make sure I keep myself clean as far as we can. If we shake somebody's hand or somebody touches, I try to do the common sense things that do it. But look, the whole thing is, people are going to have to take that responsibility on themselves. I've wore a mask when I've been asked to wear a mask. When there's requirements to wear a mask, I wear a mask. If I feel like I can keep that space, then I don't wear a mask.
We had heard that the special session you wanted was supposed to start the week of July 27th, which is the week before the primary election. Are you thinking about pushing it on the other end of the primary at this point?
Politics don't matter to me on that at all. It's about violent crime.
Well, I mean, just for timing purposes.
People are dying out there in the streets right now. And our homicide rate in our state's going up in Kansas City and St. Louis. We're trying to maneuver which is the best time, when's a good time, when politics and elections. That doesn't have a bearing to a 3 or 4 year old kid that gets killed out here, or their parents, or their people out there dealing with that. So, as far as I'm concerned, as soon as I can get legislators in here, we're going to take a look at a special session.
And can you talk about what the subjects are, or are you saving that for tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
I have one other thing. You vetoed a bill that would have changed how taxing districts are created. And I haven't seen the veto message, so I was just hoping to get kind of a synopsis of what you...
Yeah, multiple reasons on that bill. I think that had 37 provisions in it. So there was multiple reasons we vetoed that. General counsel went through it. The veto, I think the veto letter's probably got 7 or 8 different things in it. I think multiple subjects was never even heard, had public hearings on them. But again, I'd rather you refer back to the veto session because we went through a lot of bills and a lot of things here lately.
Governor, you said that you talked to President Donald Trump right before this press conference, and you said that he wants to get involved. Did he mention how he wants to get involved, or anything that he wants to do specifically for the state of Missouri or even St. Louis?
I think the president didn't like what he's seeing in the way these people are being treated, and I know the Attorney General was represented in that phone call today. So I think you'll see some sort of actions I think they're going to look into things.
He didn't mention what the actions would be?
Again, we're going to have some follow-up conversations on this. So right now, I know that that's going to be a provision. I think we got to explain to him why it's very difficult for an elected official in the state, for a governor, how you can take to remove somebody from office, or what powers you have as a governor. I don't want to make it sound like he's going to come in here and remove somebody from office, but I'm guarantee you that the president's focused on what's happening here.
Hi, Governor. I kind of want to go back to steak fry in Sedalia. I know you said that you're social distancing as much as possible, but your Twitter account tweeted photos, you standing next to Lieutenant Governor Kehoe, people coming up to you and asking questions. Why did you decide not to wear a mask if you knew people would come up to you in this event?
Yeah, it's just a choice you got to make. The one thing I know when I go to an event like that, for example, I'm not going to stand there for 10 minutes or 5 minutes and talk to anybody. If somebody's going to come up to you and say something, then I'm going to be able to separate from them pretty quick. And I think if you listen to Dr. Williams, I think really how long you maintain around somebody is important too. And then, kind of know which way their face is pointing. You learn things as you go out there, how to avoid those situations. And believe me, if something happens or if I feel like I get anything on me, we try to clean it up as soon as possible, whether that's going into a bathroom, whether that's hand cleaner with me. I mean, every one of my security details got cleanser with them. My staff does, so, I'm trying to do everything I can as governor to make sure, I'm protected when I go out there. But, again, you can't go to every event as the governor of the state of Missouri and people stay 6 foot away. It just can't. You can recommend it. You try to do the best you can. That's all I'm asking people to do.
Do you think with your messaging today about wearing a mask if you can't social distance, do you think there are inconsistencies with your message today and maybe not wearing a mask over the weekend in some of these situations?
You know what? I've been pretty clear the whole time on the mandating a mask, and I think that's what you're going to. I know this mask is a political hot-button issue now nationally and in the state. But again, I'm going to go back. If you feel comfortable wearing a mask, you need to wear a mask. By all means, do that. Like I said, I'm not out there in the thick of a crowd for any time whatsoever. I don't try to remove myself from it. So, we're well aware of the risk, too, and you have to take that action. So, no, I don't think it's confusing. I think every day I've been up here since, my gosh, March, I guess, sometime, and said, hey, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But I'm just not going to mandate it statewide, and I think that's what it really comes down to is when everybody asks me on the political side of it, why don't you do that? Because, again, just let me clear it up. Missouri's totally different. There's still a lot of counties out there that didn't have problems whatsoever with COVID-19. So it's difficult to do that.
Hi, Governor. Last year, I believe the House Democrats, maybe the Democrats in the Senate as well, were calling for a special session on violent crime, gun reform. Now that you are considering a violent crime special session, have you met with the Democrats, Republicans, the Legislative Black Caucus, who was also calling for that?
Yeah, we're in the process of that right now. All of this stuff's happening pretty much at a rapid pace. And then, again, trying to make sure that we keep everybody informed of the things that were important, that were actually all the legislators heard last year for the most part. So most of the things in this, I would say the vast majority of it is not new. These are things they had. They just didn't get it passed.
Also,
going back to Director Dixon's announcement, do you anticipate any more CARES Act money going to businesses? And the $30 million, is that enough for the need that's out there now?
Yeah, well, Director Dixon, look, back in, I think it was April, I brought Director Dixon in when in the middle of COVID-19, we're trying to find that and says, look, we still got to start developing a plan how we're going to open the state up, how we're going to get businesses back. All of this stuff we're doing now is executing that plan that he worked on months ago. We want to get as much money out there as we can to small businesses to help them get back out there, to get employees back there and get them back to work. That's the whole emphasis of why we're doing this. And, we're looking for every avenue we can to help keep the economy going along with fight this virus and get schools started. Multiple fronts we're trying to do things every day.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.